The Yamaha TZ750 flat tracker wasn't just fast, it was so violent it got banned after one race. Double the horsepower, half the control, and no mercy for mistakes. When Kenny Roberts climbed aboard this machine at Indianapolis in 1975, he didn't just win, he created a legend so dangerous they made it illegal. And once you know what really happened that night, you'll understand why he said, "They don't pay me enough to ride this thing." In 1975, American flat track racing belonged to Harley-Davidson. Their XR750s ruled the dirt ovals with steady power, reliable handling, and total control of the sport. These bikes were built for tough racing. They had power you could count on, parts that didn't break, and handling that worked for 25 laps of sliding at high speed. They were old school machines and their riders knew every trick. Then Yamaha decided to destroy that world with raw speed. The TZ750 wasn't just another motorcycle, it was a total rejection of everything dirt track racing stood for. Where Harley built steady torque, Yamaha unleashed explosive horsepower. Where tradition meant 4-stroke engines, Yamaha chose 2-stroke violence. Where the rules expected normal thinking, Yamaha delivered pure insanity. But this wasn't Yamaha's first attack on American racing. They'd already won road racing with the TZ750, a 694cc inline-4 2-stroke that made 140 horsepower and beat everything worldwide. The machine was a tech masterpiece with liquid cooling, reed valves, and 180 mph top speed. In Yamaha's California headquarters, engineers weren't impressed by Harley's dirt track success. They were planning how to crush it. The mission was crazy. Take their best road racing engine and make it work on dirt. Not change it, not modify it. Make it work. The physics said no, the rules barely allowed it, and smart riders called it suicide. They built it anyway. What came out of Champion Racing Frames in California wasn't just a modified motorcycle, it was an experiment in controlled violence. Built with Swiss watch precision and hand grenade attitude, the heart of this machine was Yamaha's proven TZ750 engine. It had 694cc of liquid-cooled inline-4 2-stroke fury. Think of it as 4 motorcycle engines tied together and fed through one throttle. While Harley's XR750 made around 70 horsepower, the TZ750 was pushing 140 horsepower at 10,000 RPM. That's double the power of anything else on the track, sent through a rear wheel designed for half that force. But raw numbers only tell part of the story. The real terror was in how the power came on. 2-stroke engines don't build power slowly like 4-strokes, they explode it. Below 8,000 RPM, the TZ750 was calm as a Sunday ride. Above that point, it became something from another world. The power band hit like a light switch connected to lightning. One moment you're riding normally, the next moment you're fighting for control as the bike tries to launch itself and you into space. To make things worse, the frame wasn't designed for this kind of violence. Ray Abrams at A&A Racing built the prototype using a Champion frame made for Yamaha's XT650 and 750 twins. It was like putting a rocket engine on a bicycle frame and hoping physics would help. The geometry was wrong for dirt. The weight was in the wrong place. The suspension was overwhelmed the moment you touched the throttle. At 150 kilograms, it was lighter than the Harleys, but that just meant less weight to control the violence. Track testing showed a machine that broke all the riding rules. When you opened the throttle, the rear wheel would instantly break loose and spin. The front wheel would lift without warning. The bike would slide sideways while going forwards, creating a riding experience one tester called like trying to control an explosion. But here's what makes the story even crazier. The TZ750 flat tracker was built from spare parts and wild guessing. Yamaha wasn't building the TZ750 flat tracker to win races, they were building it to make a point. By 1975, the AMA Grand National Championship mixed road racing and dirt track events. Yamaha ruled the pavement while Harley owned the dirt. The message was simple. Yamaha technology could beat any surface, any style, any challenge American racing could offer. The project started in early 1974 when Steve Baker and mechanic Bob Work visited Doug Schwirmer at Champion Racing Frames. They bought the display TZ750 from the Anaheim dealer show, and someone suggested measuring it against an XT650 frame. It fit, barely, but getting an engine to build around took months. When Schwirmer finally got a power plant in 1975, he knew he was creating something never seen before. Ray Abrams, who would build the prototype, already knew what it could do from drag strip testing. The engineering problems were huge. Dirt track frames needed a different geometry than road race bikes. The suspension had to handle sliding instead of cornering. The gearing needed complete changes for different surface conditions. The weight had to be positioned right to keep traction while preventing wheelies. Every part had to be rethought. Standard road race wheels couldn't handle dirt track forces. The foot pegs needed new positions for the standing slide technique. Even the handlebars needed different angles to make up for the riding position changes. Building these machines was like solving a puzzle where every piece was wrong. The engine wanted to be in a road race chassis. The dirt track chassis wanted a different engine. The wheels, suspension, gearing, and controls all had to work together in ways they were never designed for. The fabrication work was all custom. Every bracket, every mount, every connection had to be made by hand. There were no parts catalogs, no instruction manuals, no previous examples to follow. Each bike was a one-off prototype built by craftsmen who were inventing solutions as they went. 5 TZ750 flat trackers were eventually built for Kenny Roberts, Steve Baker, Randy Cleek, Skip Askland, and Don Vesco. Each cost $15,000 in unproven technology. That was serious money when a new Corvette cost $6,810. The riders knew they weren't just getting motorcycles, they were becoming test pilots for an experiment that could either change American racing forever or kill them trying. Rick Hocking tested the prototype at Ascot Half Mile in Gardena, California and set the third fastest time despite the bike being built for mile tracks. This wasn't just impressive, it was terrifying. A machine built for long straights was competitive on tight technical courses. The testing revealed problems nobody had expected. The bike was so powerful that normal dirt track tires would chunk apart under the torque loads. The suspension, designed for steady sliding, couldn't handle the violent power pulses. The brakes, adequate for road racing, were overwhelmed by the stop-and-go nature of dirt track racing. But the biggest problem was psychological. Test riders reported that the TZ750 changed their entire approach to riding. Normal throttle control didn't work. The normal cornering technique was useless. Normal racing lines became dangerous. Everything they'd learned about motorcycle racing had to be forgotten and relearned. But would Kenny Roberts actually survive his first meeting with this mechanical beast? August 23, 1975, Indianapolis Mile, the first and only race where the TZ750 flat tracker would compete legally. Kenny Roberts arrived at the track, never having seen the machine he was supposed to race. Kel Carruthers, his mechanic, had built it in his road race shop using a spare stock engine. The first time Roberts sat on the bike was at the racetrack. Luckily, Kenny didn't qualify directly for the main event. This gave Carruthers a chance to make changes before the semi and again before the main. Those changes were desperate attempts to tame the untamable. The bike wanted to wheelie constantly. The power delivery was so violent that Roberts compared it to being attacked by his own motorcycle. The kill switch that was supposed to shut down one cylinder didn't work right. When Roberts tried to control power by briefly letting off the throttle, the bike would surge with 30 more horsepower when he grabbed it again, whipping sideways without warning. The noise was unlike anything Roberts had experienced in 2 decades of professional racing. The TZ750 didn't just make noise, it screamed. 4 cylinders of 2-stroke fury created a banshee wail that could be heard 3 turns away. The exhaust note was so unique that fans could track Roberts' progress around the mile-long oval just by sound. The bike vibrated differently than any other machine he'd ridden. 2-stroke engines fired twice as often as 4-strokes, creating a higher buzz that went through the frame, handlebars, and foot pegs. Combined with the instant power delivery, it created a riding experience that attacked every sense at once. The smell was intense too. 2-stroke engines burn oil by design, creating clouds of blue-white smoke that followed the bike around the track. The oil smoke would stick to Roberts' leathers and helmet, creating a sensory memory that lasted hours after each session. But Roberts learned something crucial during practice. Normal flat track technique didn't work. While other riders stayed in one gear and used clutch and throttle control, Roberts found he had to shift gears to manage the power. In higher gears, the engine's violence was slightly more controllable. The problem was that shifting gears on a dirt track breaks every rule of traditional flat tracking. Riders needed both hands and feet available for steering and sliding. Taking a hand off the bars to shift or a foot off the pegs to change gears created moments of weakness that could end careers. The learning curve was steep and dangerous. Every lap taught Roberts something new about the bike's personality. It wanted to spin the rear tire in every gear. It wanted to lift the front wheel at every opportunity. It wanted to slide sideways even when it was going straight. Normal racing logic didn't apply. Where other bikes rewarded smooth inputs, the TZ750 responded better to sudden, decisive actions. Where other bikes punished mistakes gradually, the TZ750 would instantly punish any error with violent consequences. The semi-final became his testing ground. Running in 5th gear, he could get enough grip to actually race instead of just surviving. He won that semi and qualified last on the second row for the main event. What happened next would become motorcycle racing legend. The Indianapolis Mile main event started with Kenny Roberts dead last, facing a field of Harley-Davidsons that were doing everything right and one Yamaha that was doing everything impossible. The speed difference was catastrophic. Roberts was traveling 30 miles per hour faster than the Harleys on the straightaways, but losing time in the corners where the TZ750's power was useless. He'd pass riders on the straights, then get repassed in the turns, creating a back and forth effect that frustrated everyone on the track. The physics were working against everyone. The Harleys were predictable. Their riders knew exactly where they'd be at any moment. The TZ750 was pure chaos. Roberts couldn't predict where he'd be, so other riders had no chance of guessing his movements. Track officials were getting nervous. The speed difference was creating dangerous situations on every lap. Riders were being passed by a machine moving 30% faster than they'd ever experienced. Corner entry speeds that worked for Harleys were totally wrong when the TZ750 was involved. The crowd was mesmerized. They'd never seen anything like the TZ750's performance. The sound alone was worth the price of admission, but the real show was watching Roberts fight a machine that seemed determined to throw him off at every opportunity. The solution came from desperation. Roberts started running the extreme outside lane where no other rider was willing to go. Up against the hay bales lining the track, he found a narrow strip of dirt that would give him traction. It was dangerous. One mistake would send him into the barriers, but it was the only place the TZ750 could use its power. This wasn't just creative riding, it was revolutionary technique. Roberts was creating a new racing line that used parts of the track considered unusable. The outside groove was rougher, less prepared, and dangerously close to the barriers, but it was also where the TZ750's massive power could find grip. The technique required perfect precision. The margin for error was measured in inches. Too far inside and he'd lose traction advantage. Too far outside and he'd hit the barriers. The line had to be perfect, lap after lap, while fighting a machine that wanted to go everywhere except where he pointed it. Lap after lap, Roberts carved his own racing line while the rest of the field battled in the traditional groove. His rear tyre was chunking rubber, hay bale wire was wrapped around the wheel from grazing the barriers, and the machine was trying to kill him on every straight. The tyre situation was becoming critical. Dirt track tyres weren't designed for the forces the TZ750 created. The rubber was literally tearing itself apart under the torque loads. Chunks of tyre were flying off with each acceleration, and the remaining tread was overheating from constant spinning. But Roberts had learned something that nobody else understood. The TZ750 worked better when the tyre was sliding. The violent power delivery that destroyed traction actually created a more manageable riding experience when he stopped fighting it and started using it. The bike's personality was becoming clearer with each lap. It didn't want to be ridden like a normal motorcycle. It wanted to be controlled like a barely tamed wild animal. You couldn't force it to do what you wanted. You had to convince it that what you wanted was what it wanted to do anyway. By the final laps, Roberts had worked his way through the field to third place behind Harley riders Corky Keener and Jay Springsteen. Then, with 2 corners remaining, something magical happened. But what Roberts pulled off in those final moments broke every law of physics and common sense. The TZ750 had found traction at exactly the right moment. Roberts rocketed past both Harley riders in the final 200 feet, winning by inches in what many consider the greatest individual ride in American motorcycle racing history. The victory margin was 2 feet. 2 feet separated a legendary win from a forgotten third-place finish. 2 feet of Indianapolis dirt created one of the most famous quotes in motorcycle racing history. More importantly, those 2 feet proved that impossible was just extremely difficult. The final sprint to the line was pure chaos. Roberts had no idea he was going to win until the moment he crossed the finish line. The TZ750's sudden grip had surprised him as much as everyone else. One moment he was hoping for third place, the next moment he was taking the checkered flag. The crowd reaction was unlike anything Indianapolis had ever seen. Fans who had come to watch traditional Harley versus Harley racing had witnessed something completely new. They'd seen a rider and machine combination that redefined what was possible on dirt. Roberts' victory at Indianapolis sent shockwaves through American motorcycle racing that went far beyond one amazing ride. Within hours, phone calls were being made to AMA headquarters. Within days, emergency meetings were being scheduled. Within weeks, the future of the TZ750 flat tracker was being debated at the highest level of the sport. The problem wasn't that the bike had won, it was how it had won. Based on gearing and tachometer readings, Roberts had been traveling faster than 145 miles per hour down the straights on a dirt track in 1975. The speed difference wasn't just impressive, it was dangerous for everyone on the track. Other riders couldn't predict where the TZ750 would be or how fast it was approaching. Corner entry speeds that worked for Harleys were totally wrong for the Yamaha. Track promoters were scared of legal problems. Insurance companies started asking hard questions. The AMA faced pressure from Harley-Davidson, whose racing program was suddenly outdated, and from Yamaha, who had just proven their technology could dominate any style of racing. The media attention was huge. Motorcycle magazines featured the TZ750 on covers with headlines like "The Bike That Changed Everything" and "Too Fast for Dirt." Television coverage focused on the dramatic speed difference and Roberts' incredible riding skill. But underneath the celebration was a growing sense of worry. Industry insiders understood that the TZ750 represented a real threat to the economics and culture of American flat-track racing. 2 weeks later, at the Syracuse Mile, the TZ750 proved that raw power wasn't everything. Track conditions favored the high-torque Harleys, and Roberts struggled to finish mid-pack. The bike that had seemed unbeatable at Indianapolis was just fast when conditions didn't suit it, but the damage to its reputation was already done. At San Jose, despite mechanical problems and tire issues that forced Roberts to quit, the very presence of the TZ750 had changed the conversation. This wasn't about one bike or one rider anymore. It was about the basic direction of American motorcycle racing. The San Jose race showed the TZ750's biggest weakness. Tire technology hadn't caught up to the machine's ability. The forces created by 140 horsepower on dirt were beyond what any tire compound could handle consistently. Roberts had to choose between soft compounds that gripped but fell apart, or hard compounds that lasted but never gripped well. The tire companies were scrambling to develop compounds that could handle the TZ750's demands, but tire development takes years, and the racing season was measured in months. The technology gap between engine performance and tire capability was becoming a safety issue. What killed the TZ750 flat tracker wasn't accident statistics or mechanical failure. It was a coordinated industry response that treated the machine as a real threat to the sport itself. The AMA called an emergency rules committee meeting. 20 members would vote on new rules that would decide whether two-stroke technology had a future in American dirt track racing. Kenny Roberts was one of those 20 voters. Kel Carruthers, his mechanic who had built the winning machine, was another. Both voted to ban their own motorcycle. The decision wasn't just about safety, it was about preserving the character of flat track racing. The sport had always been about rider skill beating mechanical limits. The TZ750 reversed that equation, making mechanical advantage more important than riding ability. The new rules set a minimum piston size of 335cc and a maximum of 2 cylinders for either 2-stroke or 4-stroke engines. The TZ750's 4-cylinder design was instantly illegal. But there was more to the ban than safety concerns. The TZ750 represented technology that would completely change the economics of dirt track racing. Instead of modifying existing street bikes or buying reasonably priced Harley race bikes, teams would need exotic, expensive, factory-supported machines to stay competitive. The sport chose tradition over technology, affordable racing over absolute performance, and controllable danger over unlimited speed. The voting wasn't close. The TZ750 was banned by a wide margin, with even its own creators supporting the decision. The machine had proven its point too well. It had shown that existing rules couldn't contain advancing technology. The TZ750 flat tracker raced legally exactly 3 times: Indianapolis, Syracuse, and San Jose. 1 victory, 1 mediocre finish, and 1 mechanical retirement. By any statistical measure, it was hardly a dominant racing career, but statistics don't capture the impact of witnessing something that shouldn't exist actually working. Roberts' Indianapolis victory became the stuff of legend precisely because it seemed impossible when it happened. The bike disappeared into private collections and museum displays, but its influence continued. The techniques Roberts developed for controlling massive power on dirt became standard practice for later generations of riders. The outside line he pioneered at Indianapolis is still called the Roberts line on some tracks. More importantly, the TZ750 flat tracker proved that technology barriers were often mental. It showed that unconventional solutions could work if someone was skilled enough and brave enough to make them work. The machine also established Kenny Roberts as more than just a fast rider. He became known as someone who could tame the untamable, control the uncontrollable, and win on machinery that scared other professionals. Today, original TZ750 flat trackers are among the most wanted machines in motorcycle racing history. Only 5 were ever built, and their rarity makes them priceless to collectors who understand what they represent. They're not just motorcycles, they're physical proof that sometimes the impossible is just extremely difficult. For one perfect race, Kenny Roberts proved that impossible was just another word for untested. Would you have had the skill to control 140 horsepower on dirt? More importantly, would you have had the courage to try? Let us know in the comments, and if you want more stories about motorcycles that were too extreme for their own sport, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell.